Gimel Nissen. The Eshazach Daf Medamonim Zogin Dem Nossi. And yesterday was Bais Nissan. Yesterday was the yard site of the Rebbe Rashab and the beginning of the Nesius of the Friedrich Rebbe. And the Rebbe, Kedarke Bakodesh, very characteristically, saw this day exclusively as the Haschos and Nesius of the Friedrich Rebbe. The Rebbe's Hiskashrud, as we know, is ain't safe. The Rebbe's Hiskashrud has no limit. And the way the Rebbe was attached to the Friedrich Rebbe is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It's Hiskashrud. It's Hiskashrud. You know what Hiskashrud? I'll tell you what Hiskashrud is. Hiskashrud is an appreciation of the following radical statement made by a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Rabbi Isaac Homler, it's quoted in the Sicha, so it's a word from the Rebbe Eichet. Rabbi Isaac Homler said once that he has a raya that Shlomo HaMelech was a misnagid, or nishka chassid. I'm sure he didn't say misnagid, nishka chassid. What's the raya that Shlomo HaMelech is nishka chassid? Because when he wanted to give a mashal for the ahava that a yid is supposed to have to the Eibush, that he gave the mashal of Allah from a husband to a wife and a wife to a husband. Had he been a chassid, he would have given the mashal of the ahava from a rebbe to a chassid and a chassid to a rebbe. It's an Likutei Deburim. Now, what do you think? Huh? He was crazy, huh? You know why he was a Meshuggah? Because we don't understand Taka what this kashrus means. We truly don't appreciate the bond. In other words, as much as we're Lubavitcher Chassidim and we're certainly Mukusharim to the Rebbe, and at the very least we try to do what he tells us, we try. The depth of the bond that exists in a Chassid the Rebbe is saying the bond in a Chassid the Rebbe is deeper than a bond between a husband and a wife. And a bond between a husband and a wife, forgive me for speaking old-fashionedese, oib ze seine normale Menschen, which is not a minig America, if they're only normal people, it's an incredibly deep bond. It's a very deep, it's a neshama bond. Forget, if you learn in Chassidus, it's deeper than a neshama bond. And a Chassid Rebbe bond is even deeper. So you have to be very deep. When you're very, very in touch with your neshama, which means that your goof is very, very, very pure, and there's room for the neshama to shine through, the connection between the neshama of the Chassid and the neshama of the Rebbe emerges. And I don't know, this is radical oisius of Lubavitchers of Deir Hashvi, but the display of his kashrus that the Rebbe showed, I don't think has a precedent in history. The way the Rebbe was Mekushet from Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe is Mekushet from Friedrich Rebbe, is completely beyond fathoming. It's really unbelievable. And one of the many symptoms, one of the many, many, many symptoms of this is this, that by the Rebbe Bais Nissan, it's true, the Rebbe Rashab passed away, and as the Rebbe would always call him, the Rebbe Nishmaso, and there was a diuk here, you should know. The Rebbe always referred to the Rebbe Rashab as the Rebbe Nishmaso, and there's a diuk here. You know what the diuk is? The diuk is that when the Rebbe Rashab passed away, a chassid by a Fabrengen said to the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe Nishmaso. A chassid said to the Friedrich Rebbe about his father, the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Nishmaso, the Rebbe in Gan Eden. So the Rebbe Rayatz responded, "Was verschickst du dem Taten in Sibir?" And then I use another expression, Solofki maybe. Why are you sending my father off to Siberia, to slave labor? Ich sag nit Nishmaso Eden, ich sag Nishmaso Bi. I don't say his neshama is in Gan Eden, I say his neshama is in me. The Friedrich Rebbe said this about his father, the Rebbe Rashab. When the Friedrich Rebbe passed away, the same story repeated itself. Genoi. A chassid said to the Rebbe by Fabrengen, the Rebbe Nishmaso, and the Rebbe got very excited. And he said that when the Rebbe Rashab passed away, a chassid said to the Friedrich Rebbe about his father, the Rebbe Nishmaso. And the previous Rebbe responded, was verschickst dem Taten in Sibir, in Solofki, I think he said Solofki, ich sag nicht Nishmaso Eden, ich sag Nishmaso Bi. And the Rebbe said, und ich sag echet nicht Nishmaso Eden, ich sag Nishmaso Bi. I also say, I don't say Nishmaso Eden, I also say Nishmaso Bi. And by the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe said every single time, Nishmaso Eden. Why do you think that is? This is all hergish of Chassidim, but the reason I think is, I'm just going to go with that. Because the Rebbe has only one Rebbe. And that's the Friedrich Rebbe. So the Rebbe Rashab is in Gan Eden, as far as the Rebbe is concerned. The Friedrich Rebbe is Nishmaso Bi, and that's it. This is where it ends. So Bais Nissan is a big day in Lubavitch, especially if you know the story of Bais Nissan, the way that Rebbe Nishmaso was nostalgic. But the Rebbe, the way the Rebbe related to Bais Nissan was the day that's Chol Sev of the Rebbe. It's been pointed out that Rebbe avoided Fabrengen on Bais Nissan. He avoided it. Somebody told me, someone who knows, and I don't know if it's true, but this is what he told me. The first time that Rebbe Fabreng Bais Nissan was Tovshin Memches. 38 years after he became Rebbe, when the Rebbetzin passed away, and he spoke to the Sikh attack of Yechia Melech. The Rebbe avoided a day, Bais Nissan. I remember that David Raskin Fabreng with us once, and he told us that in Tovshin Yud, you have to understand, in the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Bais Nissan was the equivalent of Yud Shvat. It was a big day.
Is the Rebbe the only one that waited a year to kind of take on the
They were different. The Rebbe Rashab waited 10 years, 11 years. It was a difficult situation. Lubavitch went through a very difficult period at that point. So there were different types by different Abayim, but it's a Tzedek. Some places it's mashma 6 months, some places it's mashma 2.5 years.
What did the Frierdiker do?
The next day, he was a Ben Yochid. The next day, he was a Ben Yochid. The Rebbe Rashab passed away Motzei Shabbos. The following Shabbos, the Rebbe said a Maimed. The Frierdiker said a Maimed. He said it privately, and he allowed people to walk in as he was saying the Maimed. That's how he was Mekabel the Nesiyos. But okay, so the Rebbe, by the Rebbe business is only one thing. It says Chol Nesiyos of the Rebbe the Shved, as the Rebbe calls him always. The Frierdiker Rebbe, Nesidei Reinu. But just to mention a word, I want to say a word, and I've shared this with you many times, but I'm saying this in conjunction with business. We're going to get to the Maimed. I give you my word. Mrs. Katzman knows what my word is worth, and she's right. There's a Indian, there's a Maimed from the Alter Rebbe Gadim, which is based on a Torah from the Mezritcher Magid, I think. On the Pasuk B'chol Beisi Nemanu. And the Teichen Advarim is that there are certain tzaddikim that know everything. There are certain tzaddikim that know everything. The Eibishter opens for them all the doors, they see everything. But the way the Vart goes is they know and they're not allowed to reveal. They wissen the Tonish Magalza von der ganzen Asipa wegen dem ve'en kan amokim lahayich, but they're now the time to give it Arichas Advarim. But there's an Indian that there's certain tzaddikim, a Rebbe, Nasi B'Yisrael, he knows everything, but he's not allowed to reveal it. Yeah, but there's an exception to that rule. Even these tzaddikim that know everything, there is one thing that they don't know. And what is that? The inyanim which are negeya to their own avodah and to their own nisyenis and to their own golus. Something which is their inyan, something which is their birur. Every tzaddik has a shlichus. Every person has a shlichus. A tzaddik and nasi, the certain has a shlichus. Their struggle, they don't know, because if they know it, then it's not a struggle, right? The classic dogma for this is Yaakov Avinu was mourning Yosef's death, and Yitzchak is living in the same house, and knows that Yosef Tzaddik is alive, and he won't tell Yaakov. And Yitzchak is misabel. Yitzchak is suffering for Yaakov's suffering, knowing that it's not a real suffering. Yosef ate Yosef Chai. And not only is he physically alive, he's the same Yosef HaTzadik that he was in Beis Yaakov Avinu. Because if Yitzchak tells Yaakov, Hezechan Yaakov, don't worry, Yosef HaTzadik is alive, so then the Yaakov Avinu doesn't have his inyan of Rugzeh Shel Yosef, whatever the Birudim were, and the Yosef B'Shalva life, he's explained the Chassidus. Every Nisayan has a purpose. But it's only a purpose if you go through it. You know, the Bavus Tavart, that the Baruch Mezhe B'Jetayna to the Mountain of Rebbe, why did you go to jail? You could have been mavaded the whole Indian by running your hand across your forehead. Havaras Hayal Metzach would have been finished. And the Teretz is Pasha, that the Alter Rebbe doesn't go to jail, you don't have the Yifutzah Masach HaChutzah. You have to go through it. So when it comes to an Indian, which is negate to that tzaddik, there's an Indian from Havaya Heaven, man, Hashem doesn't reveal. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe said about the Holocaust, I don't know if people know this, that in the 30s, all the Polish Yidden were asking if they should leave Europe. And they went to the tzaddikim. And the tzaddikim said there's not going to be a war. I heard from a reliable source, in the name of Reb Zalman Gorari, who was around in Poland, and now it's printed in the Sefer, that the Frierdiker Rebbe said what Elisha said. You know the story of Elisha, with the Isha Shunamis, where she has this little baby after many years, and then the baby dies. And she comes running to the Navi, and the Gehazi, the Shamish of Elisha, sees her coming, and so they're seeing her coming, and they're talking as she's approaching, And Elisha says, why is she coming? Le Shabbos v'le Chedesh. There's no reason for her to come now. She usually comes for Yom Tov, for Shabbos. And then she comes in, and she falls on the ground, and she grabs the Navi's feet, Elisha's feet. She's so forbidden. And Gehazi wants to pull her away, and Elisha says, no, leave her. And Elisha says to Gehazi, Havaya Helem, I don't know why she's upset. Hashem didn't reveal to me. And then she says to him, that I asked you for a child, you gave me a child, now the child was taken away. That's the story. And then of course Elisha's Mechayim Mason. You know the story, it's in Tanakh, it's the Haftarah Pashas Vayera, I think. Okay. But this is how it is. A tzaddik's birur darf durchgehen. But another tzaddik's birur, he doesn't have to go through. So the Frierdiker Rebbe, so the No, they didn't know. They were trying to. Okay, ich will not get the Holocaust now. It's not my subject. I have a whole Torah on this. But the Frierdiker Rebbe said, I don't know. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, I don't know. There's arichas to the Sipur. You'll stick around after class. If Ariella will let me take up Rabbi Blooming's time, I'll tell you. Anyway, but my point is as follows. A tzaddik knows everything, except if the knowledge is negeya to his avodah, so then the tzaddik cannot know. So there should be a birur, and this we have kama v'kama sipurim that reveal the same idea, that a tzaddik who knows everything, some things they should let him know. So Yitzchak knows what's going on, because the whole union of Yosef a tzaddik is not his golus. But Yankov doesn't, because it's Yankov golus. And then of course the next generation, the same story repeats itself exactly. Bikish Yankov lagalish labon of ketz. Yaakov wants to tell him when the Golus is going to end. Nistalkim and Eshchina. Because Golus Mitzrayim is not Yaakov's Golus, but it is his children's Golus. If Yaakov tells his children the end of the Golus, it's Ois Golus. So Yaakov knows, and so this is the story you should know of the Estalkus of the Rebbe Nishmaso, of the Rebbe Rashab. That when the Bolsheviks, when the communists came into Rostov, the Rebbe Rashab, it was winter, it was Tavis. 2 months before, the Rebbe Rashab said, I cannot live with them. There's actually a Vart from Frierdiker Rebbe which is published, a printed Vart where the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Alle wissen, as was hat getroffen, Bais Nissan is given lelei ite. Everybody knows that what happened, Bais Nissan was not in the time. In other words, the Rebbe Rashab passed away before his time. And if you know the history of the Chabad Rabbeim, you know that the Alter Rebbe passed away before his time, the Mittler Rebbe passed away before his time, the Rebbe Marash passed away before his time, and it could be the Tzemach Tzedek also, you could declare. But the Rabbeim gave up years that things should happen. So the Rebbe Yad said that Rebbe Rashab was supposed to live longer. It was not in the right time. And the story was that the Rebbe Rashab wanted nothing to do with the Bolsheviks. But that meant that the Bolshevik Nisoyer wasn't his. He had plenty Torahs from the Tsar, plenty Torahs from the Keser. I love this word. Branav, came to the Rebbe with a sefer that was printed in 1991 in Russia, in the city of Vilna. In the same printing house, the Amona Acham Ram, the famous printing house that they printed the Tanya 117 years ago, and that they printed the famous Shas in Vilna. And he said to the Rebbe that they printed this sefer in the same printing house, the same font, same ideas, and that they wrote inside the sefer that the sefer is being published in a printing house which Yidden used before the Bolshevik Revolution. So the Rebbe says, why do you have to mention before the Bolshevik Revolution? From the king of Russia, we had few tzaddis. What do you care if it says the communists? This is almost like in other words, you think the Bolsheviks were terrible. They were terrible. But you think before was better, and you think hack the tzaddis. Anyway, but the Rebbe Rashab had no shaykhs to this golf, so it wasn't his. So that's where you have the Meiser put it, where the Rebbe Rashab made a fabrengen, and at in ganzen ungepfiffen, he acted like as if the Bolsheviks never took over Russia. He was mevatel them, and he was mevayish them, and he was mevazer them. It's a famous story, and I've told it to you many times. Berel Rifkin tells the story in Ashkafta the Rebbe that in the middle of the Purim Fabrengen was very depressed. Suddenly, the Rebbe Rashab changes completely, and he says to sing and to say lechayim, which were crimes for which you could have gotten shot at that time. There was martial law in that city of Rostov. And there was Studendik Fabrengen, the neighbors called the police, and they came from then they were called the Checker Guard, before the NKVD, before the KGB, it was called the Checker. It was the Zalba Goyim, the Zalba Rishon. But they changed names when they did enough crimes that they changed names, so they're coming now cleaned up, and then they did more crimes, and then they changed names again, and they cleaned up again, and so on. But they came in, and the Rebbe Rashab looked at these two former yeshiva bachrim, who were now anti-dati, apokursim, and so on, and he was mavatal them, and mavaza them. He said, he made fun of them, he mocked them, and the people at the Fabrengen saw them turning red and white because of the insults. And finally, the famous words, I'll say a maimer and they'll totally disappear. And the Rebbe Rashab said the maimer, the Friedrich Rebbe was beside himself. He was so afraid. And the Rebbe Rashab was full of spashes. They were for sure that the next morning they were going to come and arrest him. Nothing happened. And then 2 weeks later he passed away. So this is already Derech Yeshumas, the way I understand it. The Rebbe Rashab saw what he left for his son. And there's a story about that too. That there was a Maaseh Simchas Torah Tafresh Ayin Aleph. It's a famous story in Lubavitch. They made a terrible mistake. They set up the Fabrengen of the Rebbe Rashab in the very, very spot where his father, the Rebbe Marash's Tahare, had taken place after the Histalkus. As soon as the Rebbe saw his seat, he became very Beis and the Fabrengen of Simchas Torah Ayin Aleph is famous. Everybody writes about it. Folle Khan and Yudel Chitrik, all of us, Bashraibim, I think even Jacobs, they all write about that Simchas Torah. It was Gelui. But the Rebbe Rashab was so emotional, they were afraid of his health. So they called in his mother, the Rebbe Rivke, who was still alive. And she came into the Fabrengen, and the Rebbe Rashab stood up. So the whole room stood up. She walked over to her son, the Rebbe, and she said to the Rebbe Nishmaso, maybe you'll take a break. The Rebbe Rashab said, why? It's some Chasteire, and it's Chassidim, and it's Fabrengen. Why would I want to be mafsik? So she said to her son, the Rebbe, dir nit gut. Dir nit gut. In Yiddish, dir nit gut means you don't feel well. But it also means you got a bad card, you have a bad hand, you have a bad life. Your life is terrible. So the Rebbe responds not to what she meant, but to the words. Mir is nit good. And remember, I don't know the trop. I never heard a tape of this, you understand? But the words. Mir is nit good. Mir is good. Mir is gor good. Halavai zol Yosef Yitzchak sein as good. She says, I'm not good. I'm good. I'm very good. I wish my son should have what I have. It was Pushet and Nevuah about the generation of the Friedrich Rebbe. So this is the way we understand it, that the Rebbe Rashab was totally mevatel the communists. Why? It wasn't his Nisan, it was his son's. And by the Rebbe Rashab being mevatel the communists, he weakened a little bit the takeif that they would have when they get to his son, the Rebbe. But him they couldn't touch. Why? Because the tzaddik steht hecha von die Sachen, Seiten, das ist sein Inyan, this is his birut. And I love to share this because it blows my mind, so it's going to have to either blow your mind or bore your mind. Do you know that the Rebbe Rashab came to the Ostad, he built a mikveh? And it was a big chiddush because Lubavitch was a village with a river. So they never had a problem with a mikveh. You tabled in the river. A river doesn't need, there's no shals for Ashbeited. It's main mayan. It's water from a well. There's no halachas of leakage and baba maises. There's a problem with cold water and other things, but in terms of the halachas of a mikveh, he was living in a big city, so he built a mikveh of rainwater, which is a big chiddush, make shaman. The moment you talk about rainwater, you have all kinds of problems with Ashbeitin and the Kli and Shuvim. It's such a story, mikvahs. And the Rebbe Rashab designed the mikveh. Our mikveh is called the mikveh from the Rebbe Rashab, Beir al Gabi Beir. And there's a whole versteht Tzatche Keneged, but ein kan Makom Harach was there. When the Rebbe Rashab moved from Rostov, the government took over the house, and they covered the mikveh over. They cemented the mikveh over. 70 years later, Lubavitch bought the house back. And Lubavitch now owns the house in which the Rebbe Rashab lived, in which the Rebbe Rashab passed away, in which the Rebbe Rayatz was Makabel the Nesias, and where the Rebbe Rayatz lived for the first 3 years of his Nesias. And they found the mikveh with the water still inside. The boy to make shamim, the rainwater that Rebbe Rashab arranged, that to come from the roof into the basement in a way that fit all of his requirements about not going into a kli and being a shayla shuvim, started before the Bolsheviks took power, and it exists after the Bolsheviks went away. So this, I remember when they found it was about 20 years ago, so I spoke here, we were still using the other room in those days. And I said, what do you see here? that here was a tzaddik, that because the Bolsheviks were not his Indian, when they began, he was not greatest them. And when he left, survived them physically. What are the chances? In Soviet Russia, the same water, the Zelbe Wasser, the tiles that the Rebbe Rashab paid for to build a mikveh are now being used in a mikveh ksheda today in Rostov. The same tiles, the Zelbe tiles, you understand? The same mikveh, which is a double pelle. And the Rikin is, really, I think the lesson of Bais Nissan is how the Rebbe connected to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And this is, for a Chosid, especially a few days before Yud Aleph Nissan, when everything is Hiskashrud, this is a very special time to learn this lesson from the Rebbe, what it means Hiskashrud. But we're not the Rebbe, we're nothing, we're mamish nothing. But we have one possibility, to do what he says. To do what he says. And this is where our Hiskashrud lies. We're not going to say that we have a madrega of Hiskashrud where we understand that Shlomo HaMelech had a chsaron. You understand? Rabbi Isaac Homler said it about Shlomo HaMelech. And what are we going to say? Keep your mouth shut, you'll be smart. You know the story. If you have nothing good to say, keep your mouth closed. Why open your mouth? And remove all doubt. Everybody should know that nothing useful is going to come out of your mouth. So it's a lesson, really. It's a lesson in Hiskashrud, and Hiskashrud for us means Maisa, which we could do. A Maisa came in time to do something the Rebbe asks to do something, and we do it. We have a connection to the Rebbe, and that's really everything. By a chassid,